Good evening. Welcome to the Litchfield Board of Selectmen meeting. It is Monday, July 22nd, 2019. The board has just come out of paperwork review. I'd like to call the meeting to order and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, review and approval of consent items. July 8th, 2019 meeting minutes. The account payable manifest for July 16th, 2019 of $152,565.55. And July 23rd of 2019, $35,846.26. We have a payroll manifest from July 18th of 2019 of $60,807.28. And July 25th of 2019 of $53,207.28. We also have the town clerk tax collector reconciliation for June and the town treasurer reconciliation for June. And we also have the PA 28 tax form. Does anybody have any items they'd like to remove from these? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to accept the meetings and the consent items.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion was made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Leary.
Discussion.
Is there any discussion?
Somebody's...
Hearing none. I'd like to take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstain? Motion passes 4-0-0. Does anybody have any additional items they'd like to add to the agenda tonight? No?
One item I'd just like to add for the public record. Chairman Weber is away this evening, work commitment. So.
Okay. Public input will occur no earlier than 6:45 p.m. tonight. Okay, first up, we have Erica Lucier, who's the CPA manager, and she has our 2018 audit review.
Good evening.
How are you?
Good evening.
I'm good. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Erica Lucier. I'm a manager with Melanson Heath, and I was the manager in charge of the 2018 audit, which I'm prepared to discuss with you this evening. If we could please turn to the independent auditor's report. It's the page right after the table of contents. What we are hired to do is to present an opinion on the financial statements, and this is where we do it, is in the independent auditor's report. And the town had a clean opinion this year, which means that in our opinion, the financial statements are presented in accordance with the generally accepted accounting principles. It's the best opinion that you can have. It's the same opinion that you have had in the past as well. If you could please turn to page 3. Page 3 begins the management discussion and analysis, or the MD&A section, and it runs from page 3 to page 9. And what it does is it puts into narrative form or into words some of the highlights of the financial statements. Instead of reading these to you, though, if we could please turn to page 10, I can walk you through some of those highlights. Page 10 begins the number pages of the financial statements. And this is the statement of net position, or what we call the entity-wide financial statements. And what it does is it consolidates all of the town's funds into one column, your governmental activities. And it's presented on an accrual basis of accounting, which means that it includes your long-term assets and your long-term liabilities. Many of these figures are very similar to prior years. However, there were a few items that did have some larger trends that I'd like to point out. The first being the first two lines, which is your cash and your investments. The total cash and investments increased about $3 million from last year, but it's due primarily to timing. The town received about $3.7 million of bond proceeds during the course of 2018, and the capital expenditures related to the fire station project, which the bond was for, was about $2 million. So you had excess, cash from that bond proceeds. Additionally, there's a timing with regards to the due to the school district, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But there was an increase in the due to the school for 2018, which we'll again see in a few minutes. The other item that increased during the year was your capital assets, which is your long-term assets. And you'll see that about a third of the way down the page. It's 3 numbers up from the subtotal. You'll see other capital assets net of accumulated depreciation of $20,581,795. And that increased about $2.4 million from the previous year. And again, that's due mainly to the fire station. Continuing with the fire station theme, another increase this year is your bonds payable, which you did not have previously. That's about halfway down the page, right under your non-current. You'll see bonds payable net of current portion of $3,465,000. Again, this is new this year because previously you didn't have any bonds payable, and that bond is related to the fire station. And it's going to be paid off in 20 years. It's a 20-year bond.
So Erica, that number every year, that number will decrease,
It will, yes.
representing the principal remaining.
Correct.
Okay.
The item below it, the net pension liability, there was not a large trend in that this year. However, I do want to comment on it just because it is such a large amount. The net pension liability is $4,412,258. And what that represents is the town's portion of the New Hampshire retirement system's total net pension liability. The New Hampshire retirement system's overall liability is $4.8 billion. Litchfield makes up about 0.09% of that, which equates to the $4,412,000. The item right below that, net OPEB liability, that is also new to you guys this year. And what that represents is the future healthcare cost of retirees. Now, the reason that that's included this year is because of a new statement, a governmental accounting statement standards board number 75. And what that is requiring communities to do is to record the total OPEB liability on the books. So similarly, several years ago, there was another GASB 68, which required towns to report the net pension liability that we just discussed. Well, GASB 75 is the new one. And what the net OPEB liability is made up of is 2 different things. One is a medical subsidy. When the town pays into the New Hampshire retirement system, part of the payment is a medical subsidy, which is to help retirees pay for their health insurance. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is what's called an implicit rate. And the town does allow for retirees to be part of the town's health plan when they retire. Although they do pay 100% of their premium, because they're included in that plan, it drives the premiums up. So therefore, there's an implicit rate with regards to having those employees on your health plan, and that's the other portion of it. And it's about 50-50. The implicit rate makes up about $497,000, whereas the medical subsidy makes up about $535,000 of the OPEB liability. The next number I'd like to talk about on this page is the second number up from the bottom, which is your unrestricted net position. Now it's in parentheses, so that means that it's negative. It's negative $2,593,100. And the reason that's negative is because of those 2 liabilities that we were just talking about, your net pension liability and your net OPEB liability. If we could please turn to page 12. Page 12 is the governmental funds balance sheet. And I find this page to be a little bit more useful because it's maintained and presented the way that the town maintains its books. You have 4 different columns. Your first column is the general fund column. The next is your fire station capital project fund. That's a major fund this year because of the amount of activity that's going through the account. And then the next is your non-major governmental funds. And that includes your special revenue funds, any other capital project funds, as well as your permanent trust funds. And then there's a total. But I'd like to direct your attention back to the first column, as that is your main operating fund, the general fund. Again, as I spoke on the previous page, cash and short-term investments for the general fund, that amount increased about $1.1 million. However, it is offset by an increase in the due to the school district, which you'll see that number about halfway down the page, right above the subtotal. The due to the school district is $8,606,881 as of December 31st. That number increased about $700,000 from the previous year. So the increase in cash is offset by the increase in the liability, and that's due to the tax collections and then the subsequent payments out to the school district. The next number I'd like to talk about is the third down from the top in that first column, which is your property tax receivables. Now that number is nearly identical to the prior year, but what's important about that number is the fact that it's all current or liened, which means that it's protected in the event that a property is sold or somebody were to declare bankruptcy. The town does a really good job of making sure that properties are liened in a timely manner. Probably the most important number in the financial statements is your unassigned fund balance, which is the third number up from the bottom in that first column. Your unassigned fund balance is $1,760,775. And that's the highest that it's been in 10 years. There was an increase of about $261,000 from the previous year. So the town is doing a really good job of maintaining a strong fund balance and building upon it. Now that figure that I just told you, the $1,760,000, that's presented on a GAAP basis. The Department of Revenue, when they look at the unassigned fund balance, they look at it on a budgetary basis. So there's a few differences with regards to that. So on a budgetary basis, that figure is about $2,399,000. And that's what you use when you're doing the tax rate setting, is the budgetary basis. And the Department of Revenue likes to see that number between 5 to 17% of the town's overall budget, which would include the town, the school, and the county. That budgetary basis that I'm talking about represents 11%. So you're right within the range that the Department of Revenue likes to see, which is 5 to 17. Now, the town does have its own internal policies, which is to maintain that fund balance between 8 to 12%. Again, being that 11%, you're towards the top of that range. So again, it just shows that you do have a strong fund balance and budgetary flexibility.
So that fund balance, it's important to note, was determined on December 31st, 2018.
Correct.
So in March this year, if we had warrant articles that appropriated money from the unassigned fund balance, in theory, we took some of that money.
Right. That would be correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, as I've mentioned, the unassigned fund balance increased from the previous year, and the town does use fund balance annually as a funding source. However, you were still able to increase it. So if you could please turn to page 16, we can look at that. Page 16 is the general fund budget versus actual. There's 4 different columns: your original budget and final budget, so what you started and ended the year with, the actual amounts, and then the variance, so how you did against the budget. The use of fund balance that I was just talking about is located about halfway down the page, right above the subtotals. You'll see use of fund balance of $101,940. This is the only place on the financial statements where this number shows up as a revenue source because it's not a current year revenue, it's actually prior year revenues that you're using. On the top part, right underneath of the subtotal in the final column, you'll see $420,000 or $420,011. That's the revenue surplus, so how you did against the budget. Again, that increased about $200,000 from the prior year. So that's a strong revenue surplus. Similarly, in that same column, the second number up from the bottom, $55,095, that's your departmental turnbacks. So what departments didn't spend or encumber at the end of the year. So overall, the bottom number, $475,106, overall, that's how you did against the budget. Now, if a town is using fund balance, there's a few things that we like to see. And that is, one, that it's being used for one-time items and not to reduce the tax rate, which the town has been doing. The $101,000 was made up with a couple of transfers to some trust funds, as well as some expenditures for a capital lease. The other thing that we like to see is if you are going to use fund balance, that you're able to recoup it during the year. Now, the town was able to turn back $475,000. You used $100,000, so you were able to recoup what you used during the course of the year. If you could please turn to page 17. '17 is the fiduciary funds, and it's the last page of the number pages of the financial statements. And it makes up, it's the agency funds, which is made up of your school trust funds, as well as your engineering escrows. The rest of the document is the footnotes to the financial statements, which goes into a little bit more detail in terms of, some of the things that we just spoke about. But just to kind of summarize what we just went through, again, you have a few new things this year. GASB 75 was effective for 2018, which required the town to record its net OPEB liability. You had a new bond this year for the fire construction. So those are the two big new things on the financial statements. But the town does, as I mentioned, maintain a strong fund balance, which continues to grow. You're meeting the DRA and the town's goals with regards to the maintenance of your unassigned fund balance. We don't have a management letter this year, nor did we last year. So again, when we come into to audit the books, everything is in good order. Key reconciliations are being done. There are very minimal journal entries that are required on our side. So the town's doing a very good job of maintaining its financial records. That pretty much summarizes the financial statements.
So what you're telling us that we did a good job?
Yes.
What's this we stuff? Aaron did a good job.
But yes, the
Meant
town.
town employees, all of them.
Yeah. And again, the town, when we come in to do the audit, the town is always very cooperative and courteous and responds to our audit requests in a very timely manner.
Give you the back room for years and serve your beer and you still come back.
So Erica, before you move on, I just want to go back and just talk a little bit more about unassigned fund balance.
Sure.
Because we've been talking about that a lot over the last several years. And the board, we have not used the unassigned fund balance to help offset taxes. But what we have done, as you know, we've done a lot of one-time funding of capital needs. We've created some expendable or capital reserve funds. And funded them 100% from the unassigned fund balance. We'll use the unassigned fund balance to replenish an existing capital reserve fund. And, I still want to continue that practice. I think it's a good, healthy practice, and I think it shows in this audit that it makes us financially strong.
Yes.
I'm aware of last year, in 2019, we used quite a bit of the unassigned fund balance. And I think in 2020, I'll be having a discussion with the board about addressing some other needs that could have an expense of about $100,000. We have some snowplow trucks that we're learning that we should be purchasing. Just today, I learned about some communication equipment that's going to be very costly that we're going to need to look at upgrading.
Yep.
And I've had some HVAC equipment, which hasn't been replaced yet, and that's going to really deplete the capital reserve fund to maintain our buildings. So those are the types of expenditures that I'll be recommending to the board this fall, and how we use that unassigned fund balance.
Yep.
And also balancing, not taking too much, maintaining enough for cash flow so we can, pay the school and operate our town government.
Right.
You alluded to it earlier that the practice that we've been doing is, you support that.
Yep.
We've been able to demonstrate that we can reach in, use the fund, and replenish those funds at the end of the year.
Yep.
Through unexpended department, expenses and revenues.
Yep. And that is a key is, if you are going to be using it, even if it's just for the one-time items, your ability to recoup it. So when you're looking at the budget for the year, if you know it's going to be a very, very tight budget, well, you probably aren't going to be able to recoup as much as you might have in another year. So being cognizant of that when you're looking at using fund balance is important. But you do, with the amount of fund balance that you do have some budgetary flexibility in terms of being able to use it for those one-time items.
And just one follow-up.
Yep.
It's hard to sit here in September and forecast whether I'm going to be able to recoup or
Right.
not. I can base it on trends. But I guess if you finish a fiscal year and you don't recoup as much as you normally have, then that next year you may not have warrant articles that appropriate, from the unassigned fund balance.
Right. Yep. You have to make
You
it
might
up.
take a couple years off, build your fund back up.
Correct. Yep.
But also wouldn't, say if you had increased revenues, couldn't that count as replenishing?
Yes. Yep.
For example, this year we had more revenue than we budgeted for. So we could find it that way too. So,
That is true.
Yeah.
Yep.
and also, since if I'm not mistaken, the past couple of years, we've had revenue surpluses that we didn't expect. So.
Correct. Yes, for the past 6 years at least, the town has had, turnbacks every year. I looked at an average of what the, turnback would be over 6 years, and it was about 227,000. Again, this year it was such a large amount with the 475. When you look at the total budget, that obviously, skewed the average a bit, but you're roughly 100 to 200,000.
Sorry, I should ask you first before I talk.
No,
My apologies.
I don't know.
The only problem for the taxpayers watching, when you say it's a turnback, it isn't really a turnback of departmental funding. Like our department heads did a great job.
Yes.
It was only 55,000 that from the town budget that was a surplus. The other part was revenue that we didn't expect.
Correct. Yes.
So like if someone from the budget committee is listening or something, they'll say, oh, wow, wait a minute. You had 400. No, we had more revenue come in than we anticipated.
Right.
The department heads did a great job of staying within, but we still had a relatively tight.
Right.
From an expenditure
Here.
standpoint,
Tight
yes. Yeah.
So I just want to clarify that.
Yes.
It's only because
I
of the
apologize for using
revenue.
turn back. Yes, it was a
Surplus.
revenue surplus. Yeah, that contributed to that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And because we'll be having this discussion with the budget committee between now and, January.
More than once.
The part of that surplus or turnback is also overlay, because when we go to set our tax rate, we don't know, the amount of abatements that we'll be granting. So we set overlay. We normally try to keep that number at about 50,000 every year, so we keep it stable. If we only abate, 5,000 in property taxes, then the remaining amount was actually raised, but it can only be used for tax abatement. That's it.
Right.
So it's turned back.
Yeah.
It becomes part of the unassigned fund balance, becomes part of those revenues, right?
Other than.
Right. So even when you say we turn back revenues, part of that would be this contingency that we raise for abatement of taxes.
Right.
Okay.
And one of the
Make sure I got that right before, you know.
yeah, one of the main areas that has been a source for revenue surpluses is with regards to your motor vehicle excise. I think that's an area where the town has been conservative with budgeting on the revenue side, which is good. We see a lot of communities doing that, is budgeting conservatively for the motor vehicle excise, because that's kind of just a built-in way to be able to ensure that you're going to have some revenue surplus. So,
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you for having me.
Appreciate the work. Thank you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you.
Karen, are you happy? No one has to deal with it every day.
Well, I just want to add that, Karen should get a lot of credit. I've done business with her through baseball, and she's chased me for receipts and, proposals and stuff. And she keeps everything in line. Definitely. Thank you very much for doing that.
How did that get?
Now, what I said. All right. Well, it's 6:56. I'd like to open up public input. Is there anybody that has anything to say? Well, seeing that we don't have anybody in the audience except for the chief, I'm going to close public input and move on to our financial update. And I guess that's you, Troy, isn't it?
No. Just bringing it up here. Hold on.
I still can't get mine to come up, so that's.
No?
No, I'm about ready. I gotta keep.
See the dots.
Yeah, I did the dots.
Did
You have it?
I got it. Yeah.
Good.
Bob's got it, Kev.
All right.
Oh, wow. You don't have everything. Click on. No. Why did you do that?
Cause I'm like pushing buttons.
Mhm.
You know that.
Click on the. Yes.
Well, all right. Let me go ahead and quickly go through this. As you all know, we've hit the 6-month mark, and we are when I grabbed the numbers from the last budget report, we have overall bottom line just 43.96%. So call it 44% remaining, which is right on target. It's right where we want to be. Really have everything's trending exactly where we want it to be. So I'm very pleased with that. But what I wanted to do is just point out some things to the board. Some of these you're aware of. We've talked about them throughout the year. And these are some overages that I'll be discussing with you that will, as we get closer to year end, because we went over on some of these lines, could have an impact on the bottom line, depending on how these other line items cost out. But in the selectmen budget, you'll notice that under a lot of people, we budgeted for the town administrator. That's the only health benefits and dental benefits in the selectmen's budget. And it's already over $1,700. It should be spot on because there really isn't any moving targets there. We're usually able to budget health insurance and dental almost to the penny. But I just wanted to refresh your memory that we had an agreement with the library trustees that if they had an employee that had a change in their health and dental status, that we would cover that overage in the current fiscal budget. So that number, that 1,700 over right now, will continue to grow because you're going to continue to pay, my benefits. The good news is the library employee's status has changed and has gone back, or next month will go back on the library budget. So that's a good thing. But if anyone questions why that line's over this early in the budget, that's why. Advertising and regional agencies, in that line, you'll see that we have an overage already of $1,900. And that is, we had some other advertising, but 2 rounds of advertising for the building inspector position is really what's driven that cost. And it's expensive placing ads in newspapers. It's like $200 per day, depending on the day of week and everything. So that's what's driving that cost. In the police department, community details right now is over 2,000, and pretty much we've captured a lot of the school. A lot of this is driven by school activity. We'll have a startup again in the fall and winter. But we'll continue to monitor that. And seminars and conventions.
Are those reimbursed by the school?
No, that's
No.
part of the.
They stopped that. But we also had the union agreement with the actual salary went up on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's where we're seeing the increase.
We decided it was one
It's one
big pot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just,
Exactly.
yeah. So the community details, it's for school events, but it's also for some of our local nonprofit groups that require special services. So we don't bill out. And an agreement that we have with the school, we don't bill them for these services. And seminars and conventions, that as of right now is over 4,000. But as you probably have heard in the past, a lot of that cost is offset by the overtime training budget in the police department. So it's just something that you'll see as an overage, but the chief managing his budget is aware that up in the line above, the overtime training is usually covering that overage. The fire department, the water is over $850. That will continue to increase, and the heating cost at $9,800 over right now. Who knows how many more times we fill the tank before we get through until we hit December.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
On the water, are we paying for the old firehouse and the new firehouse?
We're paying, as I understand, the old firehouse does not have a meter.
Correct.
And so that water right now is driven by, really we're doing our best estimate on what the new station would be. But one of the things we didn't calculate was the added fee or a new fee for the fire suppression system, which is a total different bill.
Oh, yeah.
So we totally missed that. We assumed we were having one meter and, for the whole building. So we ended up.
Just like here it is too.
Yeah.
But
That's a big one.
the fire suppression system, hopefully it doesn't go off. So that bill should be zero all year long.
Well, no, there's a standby monthly fee for having that
There is a
line
yeah.
coming into the building.
There's a set fee.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be any water costs, or else somebody's in trouble.
So
Oh, no.
So under the code enforcement, the temporary inspector, obviously, as of right now is over $5,500, but we don't budget. We only budget like 1 week, if that, of time to cover for vacation and sick time for the full-time inspector. So this is offset again by the salary for the full-time inspector, which isn't being charged to right now. So I'm not too concerned about that at this point in time. Road maintenance in the overtime line, this is for our staff. We're over $1,400. And I will let you know that Kevin is routinely called out even this time of the year. He's been called out a lot. Just 1 hour events, but plug drains, trees down. So it's not just driven by winter activity. But again, I don't see this being a huge concern. Usually, we're looking at 6 storms between now and January 1st, if we get lucky. Some of those storms can be daytime storms, no overtime occurred. Catch basins, we went a little aggressive on the catch basin cleaning. So we wanted to, with the stormwater regulations, we wanted to make sure we captured as many of the catch basins in the delineated area that's regulated by the EPA and by our permit. So that's not a surprise. We did that intentionally, and but it's over, and that work is done. Animal control, electric. We were running electric heat there all winter. The heating system now is in place. But it did drive, we charged the replacement of that HVAC system to the operating budget. We did not reach out to the capital reserve fund. And so you'll see that that budget is right now over $10,900. As we get close to year end, if we're starting to see problems, bottom line of the budget, we always have the right to have the board go and authorize to have those funds taken from the capital reserve fund that we have. But as we'll talk about later, we still got town hall to deal with. So most likely, I think that overage will remain in the operating budget. And in the rec department, building repairs, $3,500. That's directly related to the repair work that we did in January for the heating system and the rental of the portable temporary heating system that we set up, and the breakdown and removal. So as of right now, areas of concern that I have is the town hall heating system. I have probably visited the facility with, I want to say, almost 6, if not 6 contractors, and some of them recently. But as of right now, I don't have a proposal from anyone. But again, I just met with a couple just, a week and a half ago, and they were going on vacation for a week. So, but it's starting to become an area of concern for me, because a few comments from these contractors is that they're very busy. It takes at least 2 months, 2.5 months to get the equipment from the factory. And then, you got to schedule the install. And so we're sitting here, it's almost August, getting close to heating season. I've done the best I can, but hopefully one of these contractors will come through for us here in the next couple of weeks. But I have no idea what the price will be. I just raised a flag, the town office, police station, HVAC system. I know on the police side this year, we've had some, in the startup of the system, we've had some issues. Previously, we've had issues. We've been told by the service department that this system's 20 years old. It's at the end of its life. And, we could find ourselves in a situation where one of these days they show up and they might not be able to repair one of the cooling units. Or you can't buy the new, thing that sits on the ground out there. So because of the difference in the freon gases and this and that. So that's something that we're going to need. Most likely, we really should have some discussion about, and maybe have a warrant article for.
That's what I was going to ask
update.
you. I would
If
think
what I'm hearing is correct,
yeah, put a warrant article forward. And
What you're hearing is that the units are getting old. We've already replaced 3 condensers before I left.
Yeah.
Okay, you got 1 heating unit, at least in the police department. The heating unit itself is getting tired up above. Condensers are good. They're relatively new, because we changed out those on the backside just recently. It's a matter of changing the units out upstairs and tying the condensers into it, because the condensers work good outside. There's 2 new ones out there and there's 1 over there.
Yeah. So it's the change of the heating units
That's the one
that will change the freon gas. That's where you get
Does
the,
not affect that at all,
no.
because the condensers affect the freon unit, not the heating unit.
Okay.
Okay.
I just know they, and again, I haven't got anything in writing
I understand.
about really what the problem is. But, for 2 years in a row now, we've been hearing, you better start planning for this. You want to do something, because you're going to get caught, and it's going to cost you some money, or you're not going to be able to address everything. But that's just something to let you know that, we can't sit here and ignore it. At some point in time, that's going to need to be addressed. Police department overtime. We have, as you know, we've had a vacant position due to an officer being out on a work-related injury. It's been an extended leave. And we also have recently just learned that one of our officers will be doing a 6-month tour with the military. So that's creating another vacancy. And I know the chief is going to be here this evening to talk to you about one of the possible solutions to try to address the needs of the department. DPW personnel costs, still monitoring the department. The budget's healthy for the highway department. I'm working with Kevin, making sure that we're we're planning out the work that we want to accomplish for the remainder of the year, being cognizant that the full-time position that went effective January 1st was not budgeted for. And then now we've just had another personnel change from the road agent retiring and taking the labor position, making that full-time, and those health and dental benefits. So just something we need to be aware of and monitor. At this point in time, not concerned about it. I believe the bottom line will be covered. And then a new item that I did hear about just, a couple weeks ago, but at that point in time, didn't know really how serious it was going to be. But our IT director, John Brunell, was in my office today, and he's still trying to collect some facts. But the communication system that's used by fire and police has had some failure, and they're trying to do some Band-Aid repairs. But at the same time, we know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the communication system. And I think John would like to, instead of just doing a 100% Band-Aid, try to take some little steps to address the problem, but also get us moving in the right direction. And I can tell you that anytime you touch communication equipment, it's very expensive. So you're going to be hearing about that soon.
Just, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Certainly.
Have you had any interaction with John Stephen up in Concord, the SWIC officer in Department of Safety? I believe I guess he just moved, maybe Attorney General. He is the coordinator for the statewide emergency response communication agency that they're trying to have a interoperability program.
Yes. We received some grant monies from him, from that department,
Okay.
but nothing for the big infrastructure. Generally, it's the portable radios that we've received.
Right. I was just wondering if you knew that they may have availability for funding for something substantial like that.
That I'm not sure, but that's something I could find out.
Yeah, he is in safety. I'm sorry. He moved over to safety.
Okay.
He is, or Homeland Security. One of them.
Okay.
His name is John Stevens. He was, call him the SWIC, whatever. I forgot what the acronym is, coordinator, but it's for statewide interoperability of radios between police, fire, and multiple agencies. Because of, lately some of the major experiences that we've had, and some that weren't able to communicate with each other.
Right.
They're trying to solve.
Ever since 9/11, they've been.
Right. So you might just want to call them and ask them if there is anything.
Well, one of the things that got cut back, so some of this, it's really the technology is kind of above me, so I don't want to misstate, but one of the things that was always planned was to move and construct a new tower with the fire station. But that was cut from the budget when we went from the first proposal down to the one that was eventually passed. So I think that's, we've got some issues with the tower at the Litchfield Sand and Gravel. We got a tower on the water tower, and then down at the old station, we have our equipment there. The plan was to leave the equipment at the old station for a while until we bought ourselves some time. I think that's starting to play into it, and I think any investment down there is wasteful. So John's looking at what he can do to bring it up to where it's supposed to be. But he's also dealing, as I understand, with the two off-site towers, Litchfield Sand and Gravel and the water tower on Colonial Drive. And there could be other things too, but he's looking at it, and I just wanted you to be aware of it because it's going to come back to you.
Wasn't there one we put to Verizon? The Verizon pole up there that's out of Apple?
Yeah, there was a proposal to do that, and I understand that went away
Oh,
with the Litchfield Sand and Gravel. It was there, but I understand that location went away.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know who made that decision.
I'm sorry, I could answer that, Kevin. There was actually a plan that we were supposed to have an antenna on that.
Yeah.
And that never happened.
Just never happened.
It just never happened.
Okay.
The second part, there was a full plan for all radio systems, but that is now stale. So I think it was something that two-way did. I know John was involved in it. I was involved in it. The fire chief was involved in it. But it was a large sum of money, to get that completely accurate and where it fulfills all of our needs for the town. But I believe that plan is stale. It's a few years old.
And I know John told us today he's trying to get to bring that plan back.
Yeah.
Refresh it, so I think there's something they can present to you.
So that was that discussion a while back ago.
Yeah, so that's where I am.
Good.
As I said, as I started off, the good news is you're at about 44% remaining, which is where we want to be.
That's good this time of year.
The salt shed, we still have some money for salt. And, you should have the salt shed full before September. Which is always important.
Also, there's 15 more Fridays to go run it.
For Saturday, I wasn't thinking so.
No.
Oh, I was melting.
Anyway,
That's all.
All right, so moving on. We have credit card authorization, and I believe that is.
So this would be, with the resignation of the road agent and the appointment of the new one, we need to get a new credit card issued to Kevin Brown. His credit, keeping the credit limit at $2,500, which is what it was previously. So if I could have a motion on that.
Make a motion. And we keep it. Kevin Brown gets
To authorize Kevin Brown, issue Kevin Brown a credit card in the amount of $2,500.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All right, all for?
four.
Against? That motion passes 4-0-0, sorry.
Maybe you check this.
It's harder than it looks. All right.
One second, that's why.
I know we're getting off this. Didn't this just happen a while ago? This budget schedule?
Oh, yeah.
So 2020 budget, right?
Wow.
Okay, so, when I'm proposing to start the budget process a little bit later this year. But in doing so, we would have pretty much the month of September dedicated to the budget. And then budget committee will take over in October.
So we'll have 3 meetings.
So we'll have 3 meetings, and if everything goes right, that's fine, but I do believe there'll be an extra Monday night in September if we needed the 4th.
You wise?
So budgets would be, this is, I would get this notice out this week. Budgets would be due to the town administrator August 23rd, and then this will give Karen, myself, time to get it all packaged together, and we'll begin reviewing on September the 9th.
Perfect. Can I ask a question that even though you get the budgets, can you send it to us a little sooner? So we don't just sit here and go,
It's a live document, so yeah, we can.
oh, it's live?
Yeah.
No.
No, I'm just saying, I can share it with you, and
Okay. I'm just saying, I like it.
it's start looking at it and stuff, and understand that numbers change every day.
Oh, that's
3 or
good.
4 times a day, but.
Just put the word proposal.
Cash receipt policy.
This will be your second review of this and looking to have the board adopt it. As I stated at the last meeting, I'm not proposing any changes. Just a requirement to review this on an annual basis. Again, it covers the collection, handling, and depositing of cash. And it specifies which departments are allowed to accept cash, which are not, how we issue receipts. It's a system that we've had in place for quite some time now. As we know, I think that the town had some problems in the past with some officials that maybe got their hands into the money or something. And this was when the policy was adopted. So haven't heard any complaints. It seems to be working fine. The auditors always review this policy, and they do audits. They'll select one department every year, and they'll go through this policy and make sure the departments are following it and make recommendations for improvements. So we had no comments this year from the auditors. Everything looked good.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the cash receipts policy as written.
The motion is made by Mr. Lemire. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Leary. Any discussion?
I have one question. In my short years here, there's always a problem getting receipts back from the departments.
Oh,
And, you know,
the credit, that's
that's one of Karen's,
yeah.
needs. Has that been improved?
It has been improving. It's still, but is it 100% effective today? It's still people will charge something and
Just wanna
put it in
make
their wallet or their glove box and, forget to turn it.
Okay.
Um,
But they're asking.
But normally, we normally can get them produced.
They don't get reimbursed until we get the bottom line. Okay.
All right, any more discussion? All for?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes 4-0-0.
I'm gonna vote again.
All right. Yeah, wrong policy.
There was no changes to this either.
No changes to this. We went through it at the last meeting. This covers, again, misappropriations of cash, and this could be from, embezzlement of funds, the misuse of inventory. So, for example, you can't take a chainsaw, a town chainsaw home and work it all weekend and that kind of stuff. Any corruption where we would have someone in a position that would, or use their position to bribe someone. That's what this policy is about. It's, I've reviewed it. It works fine. No changes recommended.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the fraud policy as written.
There's a motion by Mr. Lemire. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lynch. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion, it passes 4-0-0. Get better at it. Something that we know. Background check policy.
And that hasn't changed either, right?
Hasn't, but this year I am recommending one change to this. And it's, I talked about it at our last meeting.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Down at the highway department, because these, adding the frequency of doing the motor vehicle or the driver's check that on an annual basis, we make sure that, everyone's got a valid commercial driver's operator's license if it's a required part of their job. So that would be the only change. I will tell you that, that this year, all of these areas where we do the background checks, the credit record, criminal records, all this, we need to make sure I need to make sure we do that this year. Yeah, I have to admit, reviewing this policy, that we haven't done some of these checks for some time. And so my goal for the rest of the summer is to make sure we get all these boxes that have check marks in them, that we get all those updated and in personnel files. I have no reason to believe that we're going to find any problems, but it's the policy, it's written policy, and we need to follow it.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the background check policy as written.
There's a motion by Mr. Lemire. Do I hear a second? Seconded by Mr. Leary. Any discussion?
Question on the background, on the tree, proper licensing in New Hampshire. My understanding, you don't need to work for a municipality, you don't need a CDL by statute. According by your policy, correct?
No, the only ones,
Depending on your job that you hold, you would have to.
I understand that. Statutory requirements of the state for a town employee, that you need to have a CDL license.
No, for example, I'm not required to have a CDL license.
I understand,
but if you drive a dump truck, you do.
not that I know of. That's why I'm questioning.
Yeah, the only, yes, you do. The only ones exempt from CDL are the firefighters.
And that's
the only
I
exemption.
said that before.
Yep, that's the only exemption.
Yeah.
If you drive a dump truck, or you drive any other, CDL required vehicle, you have to have one.
That's state law, right?
Federal and state, I guess goes by federal.
Well, if you're
I'm
operating,
asking the question.
if you're operating a commercial vehicle in the
I
state of,
understand.
no, if you're operating a commercial vehicle in the state of New Hampshire, you have to follow state laws, and the federal regulations also have the mandatory drug and alcohol testing
I
screening.
understand that.
So that's in place.
Okay.
This policy has nothing to do with state or federal
That's
law.
not.
This policy is that we have certain positions that are required to have a commercial driver's license. And this policy says on an annual basis, now, if it passes this evening, on an annual basis, we'll verify that that license is valid and the person still
Yeah.
holds.
I had a question about the law itself. That's all question. Okay.
Who's chief's here? I don't enforce motor vehicle laws.
Yeah. He doesn't have to.
This policy is only about those positions that are required.
In this town, correct?
That's
Okay.
All right, any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Based off what's written, yes.
All opposed? Any opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 4-0-0. That's easy to say. So now we have the administrative report.
10 words or less.
I just have two items. One, I wanted to just point out to you, Jason Brennan had these signs made up and ordered them and installed them over the weekend. It was really a good job. Added a little character.
So that's what this.
That was the email I sent.
I'm saying,
Had these
that's
signs. Sorry.
There was a picture attached.
What was it? Yeah.
It was?
Not on mine.
No.
But yeah, they come out really good. Thank you very much. Listen, if you're watching. And I'm not going to use any names or anything, but I am meeting with the cemetery trustees tomorrow. We have an issue with one of the plots and headstone location. So hopefully it's all going to be worked out between the cemetery trustees and the resident that's purchased the plot. But
It's not Pinecrest, is it?
I think it was Pinecrest. Yeah, it's Pinecrest.
That's loose.
No. Well, I'm with the cemetery trustees, but so it must maybe it's still Pinecrest. Oh, it's got to be Hillcrest. I'm sorry, I should know. Your cemetery.
No,
Um,
I'm going to the easy big oven.
But anyhow, it's possible that this issue, depending on the outcome policy, it could rise. It's a tough situation for all parties involved.
Oh, yeah. This is not the first time. We've been through this before.
All right, select the reports. Or we still talking about?
I think you had a chance.
I have nothing.
I attended the John Bryant River Access dedication Saturday. That was really nice. Chairman Weber was there as well. Very nice job by the town putting that together. It's a really beautiful landing. My wife and I actually used it Sunday and put kayaks in over there. It's really nice. It's nice to get on the river again.
It's a nice tribute to John.
And great tribute to John. His family was there.
And highway guys did a great job too, putting in.
That's also really good job.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. So good job to everybody out there.
I did look at it, I went down before, because I couldn't be around, so I went down the night before, it was all done.
And I came after I got home.
But it was very nice. Very nice.
Any other business?
No budget committee until August 12th, I think, is a special meeting for the school budget.
We had the planning board one last week, and, the LBs, mini storage got all approved. And then they're working on this subdivision on Hillcrest Road, right, Jason Camp. It's got some little hoops and holes to crawl through, but doesn't look bad.
So that's behind.
You go Westview, and there's a new one going between Fred and Questions Old Place.
Okay.
And that piece goes all the way down to Route 3A between, almost to the farm of Question. It goes right to the farm. That's treated and sealed out there, but that's not to be touched right at the present moment. They're working on the subdivision.
All right. Our next regular meeting will be August 12th, 2019. And we are now going to be going to non-public, RSA 91A:3, 2A, compensation of any employee. And when we adjourn from our non-public session, it would be to go home.
You can turn the meeting.
Adjourn, yeah, I'd like to make a motion. Yeah. I'd like to, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
No, to go into non-public.
Oh, to go into non-public.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we go into non-public session under RSA 91A:3, 2A, compensation of any employee.
Mr. Lemire has made a motion. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Leary. All in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we will be going into non-public session now.